And we're back. We're sitting here today with Dave Woodbeck of Dope CFO. How's it going, Dave?
It's going great. Thanks for having me out here today. I was telling these gentlemen out here that this is actually some of my old stomping grounds right around here.
Very cool. Right on this Payne area?
Yeah, I got my first suit from Donald's over here.
Okay, yeah.
Played some football at Duluth and Case back here behind
this is a cool neighborhood, and you're not the first person to mention to me before, like, I've been around here since before the season sesh was here.
We won't talk about the days at the pain reliever. That's a different it's a different story.
I love that. Well, truly, thank you so much for driving down here and chatting with us a little bit more about the stuff that you do. But let's just first start with your background.
Yeah.
We like to ask people here when they come in, what was their introduction to cannabis, to the cannabis world? Sort of take us through what that was.
So I'm probably from the generation that still was quite a bit of a stigma around it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't something that I practiced, as a kid and adult. I actually don't practice it that much right now even. So I grew up and a lot of people around me were using it, and it was no big deal, but it was kind of still done behind the curtain, right?
Because you were Minnesota born and raised, right?
Minnesota born and raised, yeah. So I grew up on the east side here, then out in the suburbs for high school. So, it was always just kind of one of those things that was, keep that behind the curtain, really don't talk about it very much. Mm-hmm. And of course, as one gets older, one's views can moderate a little bit and be a little bit more, accepting of things. And so, I soon, I realized fairly early in my adulthood that, hey, look, why are we throwing a police state at this, this smoking at the time, obviously mostly smoking at that time, when it's really the same as alcohol, if not arguably better than alcohol in a lot of ways. And then, really the catalyst for me was my wife was diagnosed with MS. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, we really didn't know, because the stigma kind of carried for a while. We didn't really know what to do, and the pain is pretty significant. The sleep is hard to get after. And so finally, and this is only in the last 10 years, she was willing to start to take and try to experiment with various forms of THC. And, she's found a regimen that works, pretty good for her. So, all of that kind of led me to just to be, kind of a regular part of the culture.
Totally. Yeah, that seeing the medical impact that this plant or the derivatives can have on people can really be life-changing.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And so now, because I get to meet a lot of people doing this job, I'm starting to get, piles of salve or oils.
Absolutely.
Somebody just gave me a bath bomb the other day. So yeah, it's been really interesting.
That's really cool. So you mentioned having a couple interactions with cannabis. Are there any that sort of stand out to you as you were growing up? Is there uniquely stick out?
Yeah, most people probably do. Most certainly. So I was in college, and I had mentioned to you already that, I hadn't really used, and it is kind of not for me quite. It's just not something I do a lot.
For sure.
But in college, I didn't know much about it, and so, in fact, I won't even know what to call it here. But they put together a joint in a toilet paper roll.
Oh yeah. So like the sploof. So you're blowing through it.
No, you're sucking in.
Through a toilet paper roll.
So they dug a little hole in it. They put some tin foil in there, poked some holes in the tin foil.
Oh, that's like an old school steamroller. I totally know what you're talking about. Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
So is that. And at the time, I was in athletics, so I was in really good shape. And I took a puff on this thing, and I could hold it. I held it for probably 90 seconds.
Okay, gotcha, for sure.
And nobody told me that I shouldn't do that, or I don't know that it really matters, but I did. And it's one of those things, and marijuana, too, is one of those things that creeps up on you. So I did one. I'm like, I'm fine. I did another one. I'm fine. I started walking around. 5 minutes later, I was just like, pow.
Oh, yeah.
So I was on a couch kind of like this. It was a couch, though. And I pretty soon I'm just, and I was a fairly, straight kid. So my friends just thought that was hilarious.
I love that. Yeah, I've seen handmade pipes like that before. Not had the opportunity to hit one, but we'll try it on a future episode for sure.
Yeah, it was fun.
So take us through a little bit. So Minnesota born and raised. What was your introduction to like accounting? Was that sort of your goal when you were looking at graduating high school of I hope to be in the accounting world?
Yeah, believe it or not, yeah.
That's cool. No, I totally dig that.
Yeah. For some reason, I stumbled across it. I took an accounting class in high school, and I just was really good at it, and it just came really easy to me. So I could get my work done in my class, and I could actually just take a little nap in class. And
okay, I love that.
My classmates would get a little frustrated with me because I could get, I got good grades in it and so forth. But yeah, so I knew from the beginning that I wanted to be an accountant. So I did go and study that in college. I came out and I did what a lot of us who had accounting degrees at that point in time, we all looked for jobs in public accounting. Mm-hmm. And so I had a job with Ernst & Young, which at the time was a Big Six, and now it's called EY. It's part of the Big Four. So I did that, and then I did take a little bit of a detour. I didn't take a detour quite yet. Then I did go work for Target stores mm-hmm. in their finance department, and I actually got to see, so when you're in public accounting, you see audits and tax and things of that nature, and then when you're working for in accounting in a company, you see kind of a different side of it. And so I got to see all of the accounting functions, the general ledger functions. You get to see, what it's like to create the different reports and the P&Ls, and then really,
yeah, for sure.
Really, where it starts to have value is when you start to do various forms of analysis. So, at Target, I was there for about 4 or 5 years. I got to see all of that, and then ultimately, I left that world, but stayed a little bit of adjacent to it. I went into the technology world, and I worked for Oracle at the time, and they were just launching their financial application. So, I got to spend a lot of time applying the knowledge of finance through technology, which was super fun, by the way.
Yeah, well, and actually, so this is sort of where like the nerdy part of my brain is really enjoying this. So essentially, you're taking the application of what you were doing for years, trying to help people of organizing the back end of their businesses, and then also the tax front end auditing side of stuff, and then coming and working for a technology company to develop the tools to make that very job easier for people to do.
Easier, more efficient, imagine this is pre-2000, mm-hmm. and now we're in this age of artificial intelligence where the things we were introducing there, now the AI can do, lickety-split, but at the time, we didn't have all of those things. So yeah, the efficiency and just the ability to get deeper insights out of their data, that was a really good, and it was transparently, it was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. It was just a lot of fun, and not that the accounting world wasn't fun, but it had its reputation for being a little bit more locked down. Yeah. Although the E&Y Christmas party was a blowout.
Well, and that's such a cool part of the country to be in, or it's such a cool job to be working on. It's such a unique time where you're watching this industry go from, obviously the 90s weren't when people were like in their garages, but that dot-com bubble explosion of the early 2000s turned technology from something that like people saw as a day-to-day function into this massive industry.
Exactly.
Or do you see any parallels between that and the cannabis world of today, or sort of what lessons do you think you take away from being in this upstart industry that now you're helping people the very same?
Well, one of the things I learned in the technology business, and then you can apply it to a lot of other trends or functions, it's called the hype cycle. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this.
Oh, for sure.
You've heard of the hype cycle.
I love a good Beanie Baby, Yeah. So, but talk us through a little bit about it.
Yeah. So there's that, and then in the business world, it's a curve. So it has a slope of it's called the slope of enlightenment. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, but it's harsh and painful for the people that go through it. So you have a slope of enlightenment, then you have the trough of disillusionment, mm-hmm. and then you have a slight uptick to the plateau of productivity.
Okay.
Right. So, and I think when you see that, when marijuana releases itself state by state by state, you see that exact thing, right? And so folks like Michigan right now are in, they're deep in the trough of disillusionment.
For sure.
It will shake out and they'll reach a level of productivity. And I think that's one thing that when I'm talking to folks here from Minnesota, I actually just had a nice meeting with a gentleman earlier this week who recognized that when they're building their financial plans, mm-hmm. that they're recognizing it's not going to be, gangbusters all the time. You might be gangbusters the first 12 months, mm-hmm. but you have to be prepared for price compression. Oh, yeah. Even the cost of supplies going up. You just have to be prepared for all those things. And so that the hype cycle is a really good way to talk to people about that.
I think that's such an important lesson, especially because, like you said, those first couple of months of an industry turning on, you have people buying $400 ounces and they're excited about it.
Right.
A year later, they would laugh at the idea of walking out of a store for that. And how do you as a business prepare for, I'm not changing a ton of what I'm doing internally, but the consumers are really shifting in that approach. Yeah. are there, I mean, not like trying to ask you to solve all the problems, but what can businesses do as they're looking forward to the inevitability of that drop to sort of be planning for it?
Well, I think they do. That's exactly what you have to plan for it.
Okay, totally.
Right. And part of that is just literally doing the work to put the scenario out there and say, what will I do should that happen? Right. And play out various scenarios. Sometimes when you just role play that out and game it out, you have a better reaction for when it actually happens. And it's not like people don't expect it to come, but they don't always talk about it, right? They don't always put it on paper. They don't always model it out in their financial statements and say, here's what could happen, and then what do I do about it as it comes, right? And it takes a lot of discipline to do that.
Yeah, I've seen a fair number of financial projections of people saying, oh, we're going to grow year after year. So like, yeah, the price is going to drop, but it's fine.
Right.
And I think people ignoring the fact of your, like, sure, you might be having more sales, but if that value per sale continues to creep down as more and more stores open around you,
right,
you gotta be ready.
Gotta be ready.
So we skipped ahead to cannabis. I want to go back a little bit. You were working in the tech world for Oracle.
Yeah.
When did you transition into working in cannabis?
So actually just recently.
Okay, for sure.
So as I went through the tech world, and you had brought something up, which is a good segue, right? There was a .com bust. Mm-hmm. So I went through that.
Okay.
And I started my first business, like a lot of people do, out of necessity. Right? The nice way to put it is RIFT.
Okay, for sure.
Reduction in force.
Yeah, downside. Yeah. Yeah.
Some people would say fired. Mm-hmm. But I got RIFT in
promoted to customer, I think is the term I've heard. But yeah.
In 2000, 2001. And so I had a passion for starting a business at that point in time. And I had this finance background, but I actually built a marketing company.
Okay.
I had a passion for the way that people think about buying. I had a passion for the way to present that to people. And so we built a digital marketing company over the course of, the next 15 or 20 years. And in any small business, you play multiple roles. And so I clearly played, a CEO role, and I played a CFO role, amongst others. But ultimately, towards the end, I was primarily playing the CEO and the CFO role. And that we were able to exit that successfully in 2021.
Okay. Very cool.
And I'll just give you this little snippet too, and maybe we'll pick it up on a thread later if it seems interesting. But that's the other thing that businesses don't always pay enough attention to is, what is your exit plan? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And the exit plan has a couple of important things to it. Whether you exit or not, the fact that you're saying there's a point in time in the future where I want to have a certain value equation, right? Whether that is really selling it, or you might want to have a lifestyle business. Nobody has a lifestyle business if their business is running. Can I swear in this pocket?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, please.
If it's running shitty.
Yeah.
That is not a lifestyle that anybody wants. So whether you want a lifestyle business, which I think a lot of people in cannabis might envision that it becomes, or if you want to have a business that you can actually exit and get paid well for it, having a plan to do that really, really matters. And again, it's like a mental model that sets you on your path.
Yeah. I think that's a really prudent conversation for people to be thinking about, especially today as you're starting up your business. Because sort of like you mentioned, growing a business that's looking to be acquired versus growing a business that you hope to run for the next 30, 40 years, that's different. You do those two things slightly differently. Yep. And of course, you want the best business possible, all of that. But yeah, you're setting something up for someone else to run versus this is my ship.
Right. And although the mentality of those two things might be different, the outcome is the same. Mm-hmm. You're getting a level of freedom that you might not otherwise have had, right? Whether you exit out or whether you are able to convert into a lifestyle business where really somebody else is probably running more of the operation than you are at that point in time.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So anyways, a little bit of a sidetrack, but that's what I thought the exit planning was important. So we exited out of that in 21, stayed on for several years to help transition out, and then it was time for me to move on. And so that was October of 2023, and it was great. Like I for the first time in my life had an abundance of time, wasn't in a hurry, and I was really enjoying it. But then what came into my vision was I was paying a little bit of attention to Minnesota's rollout and so forth. Mm-hmm. And while I'm paying attention to that, I see this Dope CFO philosophy in this company, and I was kind of interested, so I dug in a little bit, and Pretty soon I'm thinking, wow, this is really quite interesting. Here you've got a really niche industry. It requires a really niche skill set in the accounting function, and even beyond that, because very few industries are subject to 280E. So a niche industry, a niche skill set, and then deeper skills within the skill set. I thought this is really intriguing, and so I rallied with my colleague Justin Woodbeck, and we got this started last April.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So it's sort of the coming together of helping people with the analytical side of things, of exploring like how do you market yourself, how do you get that message out to people, how do you run the back end of your business. Yeah. How do you prepare yourself for auditing? Sort of all coming together, but then available for people that are starting up cannabis businesses.
Yeah, I'd like to say, every business, especially if you're a service business, you have some foundational things that are true, but then you're still, a lot of it is run by people. It's not run by machines per se, it's run by people. Yeah. And so I do think we've got an interesting combination of skill sets between, technology, marketing, finance, that could be really helpful for guidance for cannabis businesses, right? I'm not going to go into a cannabis business anymore and do their marketing. That's not my role.
For sure.
But I have an opinion on it, and I know what to do, and certainly I know a lot of things that are good, and I know a lot of things that are bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're not coming into businesses and saying, "Hey, I'm going to teach you how to grow better plants." No. But what are some of the things that you do for businesses, both as they're starting up, and then businesses that once they're operating, they're making sales? What kind of services do you provide for those? So
to start off with, being really simple, we provide the full stack of accounting services.
Okay.
So this is bookkeeping, this is accounting, it's the CFO work and things of that nature. But I think we have an approach that's unique, and I think people can, if I can describe it properly, will appreciate it, right? So we really build our business on what we call the value pyramid. And at the base of any pyramid, you have a foundation. Mm-hmm. So most cannabis businesses understand that they need bookkeeping, right?
For sure.
And they understand that they need tax preparation. They that's just
or
inherent.
at least they should. Let's clarify that they should need that.
Yeah. I mean, if you're filling out your application, it's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Right? So that's part of being at the base foundation. Mm-hmm. But when you go to the second level of that pyramid, it's what we call operational excellence. Mm-hmm. This is where you get into more sophisticated things. It could be 280E. There's a thing in this in these functions called cost accounting, which is an important element of getting 280E right and filing your financials properly. It doesn't always tie directly to tax, but it has a connection to it, of course. But this is where you get really excellent at operating the accounting function, right? It's more than the journal entries. So that's level 2, operational excellence. Then level 3, you move into world-class finance. Now, to me, this is where the big value adds start to come in. And this is where you're starting to look forward in your business, not just backwards, right? When you look at a report, you're looking in the rearview mirror.
For sure,
it already happened. And so you have to look forward in order to be more effective. So when we talk about things like planning, then it comes out as actual forecasting, right?
Yeah.
It's creating budgets. So, here's another thing. When people are spending money, they often have a really good intuition of how they're doing, but they don't have any specificity, right? So oftentimes they're looking at their cash account, and that's kind of the way they're managing their business. And I'm not suggesting that's a bad thing, but you can add a certain element of, again, forward-looking, and specificity to it, so you start to know where do I have a problem here, and where can I start to fix it. And there's a lot of leadership that starts to develop in the operational section, and then in the financial excellence section. And then the fourth layer really results in it's strategy, it's your tax strategy, it's your exit plan strategy. It could be your your capital acquisition, your capital funding. It could be future mergers and acquisitions, right? It's bigger finance topics. But what all those things really accomplish for a business is confidence or peace of mind. And I will tell you, as a business owner who ran a business, and this is not everybody has the same mental makeup, but confidence was elusive.
Yeah, for sure.
But I will tell you, man, there is nothing that drives more confidence than a great pipeline, great cash flow, and some semblance of knowing that you're going down the right path.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, I think that plan that's so spot on. That having the plan on what I hope to do changes your business from being reactive to proactive.
Right.
You no longer have to say like, oh shoot, now I'm getting audited, I better prepare all this stuff.
Exactly.
Oh, now I have this problem that I need to go and solve.
Yeah.
But it's these are the things I'm doing today so that I am successful tomorrow.
And that, I'm just going to touch on one thing to bring it down to something that's, it's tactical, but it matters. So one of the things one should do to be sure that you're audit ready at all times is it's what's called a data room. I don't know if you've heard that term before. It's fundamentally where you just keep all your core files, and it's a pain in the ass. I don't know how many times you've worked with like computer systems and file folders and all that stuff, and your stuff ends up in 1,000 different places, and thank God you can search for it because you can ultimately find it. But a PDR is a perpetual data room is simply a well-structured set of folders where you put your stuff. So when you get audited and the auditor says, yeah, I need to see the contracts from the 5 vendors that, from 5 of the 25 vendors that you just spent money with, you're like, no problem, here they are. Right? Versus running around with your head cut off when you're already too damn busy.
Yeah.
Right? And now you're trying to deal with an auditor, and that's just no fun, right? So it's not sexy, it's not cool, but it's one of those foundational things that if you do it right, you're getting yourself down the right path.
Yeah, well, and I think especially in the cannabis industry where we have like this stark need for OCM is going to be coming, they're going to be looking at your facility. You got to have those financial records, and you can only do that by preparing them ahead of time.
Exactly.
What are some of the other things that are sort of more of those lower level fruit, if you will, that business owners, if they're looking at setting up or operating, really should be doing to try to catch some of those things that could go wrong?
So here's another, non-sexy but important thing, and it's simply reconciliations.
Okay.
So most people are familiar with a bank reconciliation, or you balance your bank account. No, I don't think anybody does that anymore on their personal level.
Not anymore, sitting down with a checkbook, but yeah, totally. I get what you mean.
But you used to do that. But in a business, of course, it's much more important. So, cash is just one example of a reconciliation. If you're selling stuff, you're going to have accounts receivable. Reconciling your accounts receivable, or what's called a roll forward, becomes a really important function to make sure that you've done it right. And then, a form of a reconciliation, I'll again, this is debatable, but looking at the aging of your receivables, which is simply saying, how long has it been since you paid me?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And then just having discipline around these, I would put these right between the foundation and the operation, but you just got to be really disciplined about them. They're not always fun to do. They're boring for months on end. Nothing will change. But all of a sudden, boom, you find something.
Yeah.
So in my marketing business, this is what I'm about to explain as a control procedure, right? And so these control procedures are often talked about in the accounting world. I'm going to give you one outside of the accounting world because they exist everywhere. But it had a real impact. So long story short is we were working for a company that sold baby formula. And in the mail, they would deliver to you a booklet. And in that booklet were checks. They're not coupons. They were literally checks that were run through the banking system.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So on a check is a routing number. Again, that routing number makes sure that if I'm a retailer, I put that check in the bank, it gets to the bank that owes me the money.
Yeah.
So we had a control procedure. And the control procedure was because we had to change the routing number every month for a variety of reasons. But the person would look up on their schedule, they put that routing number into the print graphic so the printer could print it. And that was our control procedure. So we were missing a very important thing in that control procedure. Third-party validation.
Okay, yeah, totally.
Right? So we sent out the wrong damn routing number. And that's the kind of thing. I mean, we're talking hundreds of $1,000s worth of checks out in the
something
marketplace.
that just can't be cashed because that routing number is going to nowhere. Okay.
And this baby formula company is working with big retailers like Target. Well, I mean, they're not, right? This is really bad. It worked out for us, right? It wasn't as bad as it ended up. But think how simple that third-party validation would have been. Check. And you're done.
Totally. Well, and I think those things, like that's such a great example because it's those things that I think are going to get missed by a lot of cannabis business owners as they transition, and this isn't meant negatively, but transition from the legacy market to the legal market.
Right.
Is, back in the day, a handshake agreement,
Yeah.
that was cool, and that was sort of it, and you knew you got paid because you got the cash before you left, and that was it.
Right.
But I agree with you. The accounts receivable, looking at how many days things are past due or that things were actually shipped and making sure that your business is running how it should
Right.
is something that people forget as they scale up. I think, especially in cannabis.
Yeah. And then, as you move up call it the value pyramid, the other big thing that you can do to put controls on your business is not just looking at a financial report. You look at a trend, and the trend will often tell you, and it's not just an analytic function. In this case, I'm talking about it in a control function. It'll tell you when something's not, has gone different, right? Or it's different than when it's been in the past. And a lot of people don't use that as a control feature. They only look at a report. They might look at trends from a revenue standpoint because everybody wants to look at that. But there's other ways to use your reporting to make that happen. And in today's technology world with AI and so forth, it's much better at alerting you. And in fact, a lot of personal finance programs now, I can't remember, what is it, Rocket, somebody or another, who can flag that you've been on a subscription for so long. And
I've been getting ads for that on podcasts for sure. Yeah.
So, we can apply that at the company level now too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's so cool seeing the conglomeration of technology, accounting, and cannabis coming together to do things that I think people 10 years ago who were selling in the legacy market never would have even thought of. I remember being in high school, college, because I was an adult, and proposing to my buddy of mine, hey, we seem to be helping to connect a lot of people with cannabis, not selling, of course, just connecting. We should probably use QuickBooks to keep track of that. And him looking at me and being like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, no, we're not going to track that in QuickBooks. And now today, you can actually use a lot of the powerful analytical tools that apply to every other business, but for cannabis.
That's funny. That's a funny story.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, I'm curious to hear a little bit more about some of that day-to-day and what kind of stuff people should be looking forward to in the future.
Great.
So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about what the day-to-day operations of working for Dope CFO looks like.
Yeah.
I think people can picture like a cultivator. You're spending a lot of your days dealing with plants. The gummy production side, you're spending your day doing that. Yep. What does that look like?
Well, and it kind of follows the value pyramid that we just spoke about, right? And so there's a set of functional, technical, and strategic things we need to bring to the table on a regular basis. And accounting is very cycle orientated. So, you close your books at the end of the month, and then you provide a financial report, and hopefully you're comparing that to a budget or some kind of benchmark. And then maybe the, days 10 through 20, you're working on the next budget out or the next forecast out or some analytic or strategic exercise. So, you got to be really sharp, and there's a lot of moving parts in there, and there's no small amount of taking care for this foundational stuff that we talked about, right? Some of the things I just described, they take some energy and some effort, and staying on top of your books on a regular basis is important. So those things happen on a weekly basis, keeping your books up to date and doing some of the things that I talked about, reconciliations and so forth. Get into a monthly cycle where you're going to report out, and then move up the ladder to more strategic things. Ultimately you want to get to more of the strategic things and less of the tactical things.
For sure.
And get people asking questions and being curious about how their business is running, right? And so the other thing that becomes really critical and important is, I think every department leader would say that they kind of sit at the middle of all things going on around them. But I will claim that quote unquote CFO role or controller role has a lot of that, because all the numbers ultimately end up in the financial statements as a function of being the scorecard of the business, right? Tells you how the business is running. So when you get some of these foundational things done and they're locked in and they're rolling well, then the CFO or the controller has an opportunity to partner with other departments and get really good at how they're feeding information to the finance team, how the finance team can feed information back to them. And that's when, if you get that cycle rolling, then you really start to have a strong team that is, on top of their business, on top of their numbers, able to look forward, not just backward, and really run at a high level.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's going to be such a powerful tool, especially as people are like, yes, hemp is always an evolving world, but as people are moving into adult use and having to ask themselves, should I make various choices? Should I work with this distributor? Should I work with those questions? Are really going to be impacting, like you said, the bottom line of how much money your company is making and whether you're able to keep operating. And you gotta plan for that and not just, sort of willy-nilly.
And I just want to make one comment about, I don't know if you can make one comment about 280E, but in the end, there's a ton of judgment inside of 280E. And I think there's ways to be, I'm going to say aggressive, but don't be egregious.
Okay, surely, yeah.
Because there's lots of ways to judge something. And I think in the end, you can be aggressive as long as you're willing to, number one, defend it. And number two, be willing to live with some level of risk that, you're going to get dinged. But, in the end, the auditors that come audit you, they're also humans. Mm-hmm. And if they see that you've got good defense and that you've made a good effort to track the way that you're doing things, then I think, you're going to be in a decent spot.
Yeah, and you're talking about so people are able to like put the dollars and cents to it, like making a different amount of payment on your taxes and potentially being able to push that payment lower by being strategic about how you categorize things, strategic about how you run your business, where it's not just like, I have a better filing, but it's you are actually saving your company money as you operate.
Yeah, again, by being smart and documenting and being able to defend is the biggest thing, right? Yeah. So it's not, you can't beat 280E. Mm-hmm. You have to manage it. Yeah. And, that's just it. And anything else is speculation. And I'm okay with speculation. I'm okay with risk. As long as you know what you're risking and you have the risk tolerance to do it, okay. Mm-hmm. A lot of the folks are holding back their payments and taxes, and they're holding it under, various ways that they're interpreting what's going to happen. Okay. Yeah. But you better be able to defend it and know that you're speculating a little bit on an uncertainty, as we're just seeing here in the first quarter now, right in the first month. Yeah. Right, where the appointment to DEA is, has some unfriendliness towards cannabis, and who knows how long it's going to take.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's been an interesting one to watch. We touch on like the cannabis stock world every so often here, and it has been interesting watching these multi-state operators sort of take that gamble of, we're hoping there's going to be some sort of legal change that makes it so that this money that you say we owe now, we don't owe later. And I think a lot of people are banking on hopefully that works. And
I think if the big guys can knock down the walls for the little guys, so it might be the only nice thing they do for the little guys. So.
Oh, that is for real. Awesome. Well, it was really great chatting with you a little bit today about Dope CFO, about some of the services that you guys provide here in Minnesota. For people that are looking to connect with you a little bit more, where would you recommend that they reach out?
Well, can I give my email address?
Absolutely, yeah. However people can get in touch, for sure.
Yeah. Right now, the easiest way is email. I'll give you our website as well. But so it's dave.woodbeck at dopecfo.us.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes so people can click right on that.
The .us. A lot of people do the .com, and then we never see it. I'm just going to give my phone number, too, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll put them both.
You can text or call me at this, and I hope it doesn't increase my spam. But 651-592-3461.
Awesome. Well, if you're considering starting up a cannabis business, if you're currently starting up a cannabis business, or if you've been operating a hemp business in Minnesota, reach out, because I think not many people think of the financial services until suddenly they need to. Yeah. And like you've been talking about, being that proactive planning of it is how you ensure that this is successful for you and not a headache.
Do you mind if I just add one last thing?
Please, absolutely. Yeah.
One of the things we dialogued about is, what should cannabis companies be thinking about? Here's the thing I mentioned at the beginning. They know they need a bookkeeper. They know they need a tax preparer. They often forget about this finance leadership function. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, somebody's doing that work or choosing not to do that work, right? So, be smart about how you're choosing to do those types of things, because unless that is where you want to spend your time. So, for example, in my business, I decided that's a good spot for me to spend my time. I have that skill. I can be a CFO. I'm gonna focus there. And then I was able to either have partners or colleagues step into the roles that they were best at.
For sure.
But man, somebody's got to do that. And so every minute you're dealing with a payroll issue, or you're dealing with not understanding the reports that have been generated, or you're not understanding what your tax guy is saying back to you, that's all a waste of your energy, right? And so, will these things cost a little bit more than a bookkeeper? Yep, they're going to cost a little bit more. 70% of businesses fail by year 10. Yeah. That doesn't account for the uniqueness of cannabis. That's just the general market. Mm-hmm. Okay. You want to increase your probabilities? Well, you best get after understanding your cash, your finances, et cetera. Otherwise, you're just making it harder for yourself, and you're increasing your probabilities of failure.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I think that actually brings it really full circle for the conversation that we had, because we started by talking about businesses that are looking to plan for that inevitable decrease in the market and that hype cycle. Right. having that leadership in your finances and not just having it be sort of month by month figuring it out is going to make the difference between whether you survive that deflation or whether you don't.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, thanks for adding that. Thanks for coming in. I definitely encourage people to reach out because the financial conversation around a business is one that you could have for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time.
Yeah.
And it's only going to make you a stronger business and more likely to succeed.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. I appreciate it.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
We'll be right back.